Are you worried that your children are falling behind? Are you worried that they're not where they should be? Are you worried that you are not doing enough for them? That you're failing as a homeschooling mother? That maybe they would be better off in school? Before you jump to that decision, grab a cup of tea, grab your notebook, and listen to this episode. This is episode number 68 of the Raising Mums podcast. Welcome to Raising Mums, a live weekly broadcast streaming on Facebook and Instagram that inspires mums to live with purpose and intention, to raise their children mindfully, and empowers mothers everywhere to own their lives and thrive doing it. So, the time of recording this, it is March, and this is usually the time of year where people start to look back at those original plans that they so carefully and diligently planned out in August and September. And they're looking at those plans now and realizing how far they are from achieving what they had thought they would achieve back in September. We've had a few months as well that have passed since the new year. And you look back and think, those plans I had for this new year have fallen through. We're so behind. Look, I'm not going to tell you that you're not behind. I don't know what's going on in your home, but I do want to make sure that before you jump to any conclusions about the future of your homeschool, that you are actually behind. So let's just start with this idea that your children are behind. Unless they have an imminent external exam coming up or an application to a school or college, really, who is deciding whether or not they are behind? What is behind? Compared to who? According to what? When you think about being behind, it's often because you believe that something over there, something in your future, in your children's future, will be better. When they get to that place, that imaginary place, then things will be better. Then your children will have caught up, quote unquote. Then you can relax. Then you can start enjoying your homeschooling. But the problem is, when you live like that, when you tell yourself this story that you're behind, how do you feel? Now really, I want you to think about this. When you are telling yourself that your children are falling behind, how does that make you feel? And then from that place, how do you react? How do you treat your children? How do you approach teaching them, being with them every day? Do you feel overwhelmed, maybe frustrated, maybe really sad? And when you feel like that, how do you treat your children? I bet it's not in the way you want to. And if you're always thinking that you're behind, if you're always running to catch up with this imaginary goal in front of you for you and for your children, how does that affect the way you actually run your homeschool? Either those feelings of overwhelm and hopelessness are going to cause you to procrastinate and to avoid the issue altogether, which means, of course, that your progress is slowed down even more. Or for some people, they will work harder. They will force their children to do more in the belief that they can somehow outrun this feeling of being behind. But you know that never works, right? Because you haven't changed the thought behind it. If you always believe that there's something better just over that next step, just over that next goal, if we can just finish this curriculum, if we could just get him to read a few more books, if we could just squeeze in another half an hour of schooling every day, if we could just add in one more extracurricular activity, then we'll have done enough. But every time you add more, your brain wants more, and you will never feel content that you are doing enough. You will always still feel that your children are behind because you never did the work to change the thought. And in fact, by adding more stuff in, by trying to race and push and being this state of perpetual hurry, you actually slow yourself down. Am I right? How many of you who are listening, how many of you have felt insecure, felt that what you were doing was inadequate, that you weren't doing enough, and you bought more things, you bought more curriculum, you enrolled your children in more activities, only to realize that the other things in your homeschool suffered because of it? I know I've done it. So what do we do? How do we change this thought, this belief that our kids are behind, that we are behind? How do we escape from this perpetual rush, this constant nag that we're not doing enough? Well, think about the most pious, righteous people in your life. Think about them now. Think about the state they are in. Think about how they carry themselves. Do they come across as people who are in a rush? Do they come across as people who feel hopeless, inadequate? Are those people ever thinking they are behind? From my experience, the most righteous people that I've come across seem to be fully in the present. They don't believe that over there is better. They're not always worried about the past, but they are fully engaged in the moment right now. And if you can learn a lesson from them and bring that into your family's home, you can begin to enjoy your homeschooling more. If you can stop feeling behind, you can learn to appreciate and love and fall in love with homeschooling again. What about, instead of thinking you're behind, instead of thinking that your children are behind, what about if you thought you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Your children are exactly where they are supposed to be. How does that feel? How does that change the emotion that you feel? So before we continue with the rest of today's episode, I just want to pause for a quick break to tell you about an incredible resource that I have for you and your family. Connect with your children this Ramadan. Strengthen their iman. Deepen their love for Islam with our exclusive library for Muslim parents. Choose from hundreds of free resources. Teach Quran, Seerah, the 99 names of Allah, Ramadan and Eid crafts, and much more. Create a memorable and meaningful Ramadan for your kids. Visit ourmuslimhomeschool.com/library to get access to our huge library of hundreds of educational resources for Muslim kids. That's ourmuslimhomeschool.com/library. How do I know that your children are exactly where they are supposed to be? Because that is exactly where they are right now. That is exactly where Allah chose for them to be right now. If they were meant to have completed that math curriculum, they were meant to be reading at a higher level, then they would have completed that math curriculum or reading at that higher level. Allah would have made it so. But right now, where they are is where they are meant to be. And how does that feel right now? What energy does that bring to you and your homeschool? It brings you the kind of energy that you need to face the day with joy and to face your children with love and compassion and trust in Allah's plans. That doesn't mean you don't try to improve things. That doesn't mean you don't ask for help if you need it. But when you approach it with this kind of energy and this kind of trust in Allah's plans, then you can make good decisions, as opposed to when you feel behind, when you feel a sense of hopelessness, when you feel inadequate. That kind of energy is not the kind of energy you want to use to make decisions, especially when it's to do with your children. So when you have that thought, they are so behind, we're so behind, change it to we are exactly where we are meant to be. Before you started home educating your children, I'm sure you had visions in your mind of what it would look like, of the things that you would do, of the subjects and activities your children would enjoy, of the way you would be as a woman. Think about her now. This doesn't have to be in the future. This doesn't have to be somebody who you will become when you catch up, when you're no longer quote unquote behind. You can be her now. You don't have to wait for your eldest child to reach this goal. You don't have to wait for your home to be organized. You don't have to wait for your toddler to grow out of that difficult phase. You can be that woman who you thought you would be now. And I bet that version of yourself was never thinking, we're behind. And I bet when you dreamt of homeschooling and you saw yourself with your children, that version of you was never thinking, we're behind, was never perpetually worried and rushing from one subject to the next. That version of you was fully present. And you can be her today. You do not need to wait. You can be that relaxed, loving, present woman now. And you know what? When you do move into that person, when you do change the way you think about home education, you will actually get more done. You will actually find that your homeschool becomes more productive because you become more creative, more loving. Your homeschool environment becomes happier and you learn to savor those moments, to treasure them, to be less stressed and enjoy the homeschooling experience. And that is what you always wanted. That is what you dreamed of for you and for your children. There is no place, there is no future where everything will be perfect. You can be that woman today. Your life does not need to be perfect to become that woman, to become that mother. So before we wrap up for today, I want to read you a review that was left by Anila for the Raising Mums podcast over on Apple Podcasts. Anila said, therapeutic and motivational. Thank you, Dr. Gemma. Your advice is so rational, logical, and easy to implement into daily routine. Some of it's like free therapy. It doesn't seem overwhelming. I love the way you break complicated matters into smaller issues. Thank you so much, Anila, for leaving that 5-star review. Now, wherever you are listening to this podcast, head over to the provider and leave the Raising Mums podcast a 5-star review. Even better, leave a written review so that I can read it out in next week's podcast episode. So I challenge you today, when you catch yourself thinking you're behind, remember that you are exactly where you are meant to be and that your children are exactly where they are meant to be. And become that woman you always dreamt of becoming. Thank you for joining me here today. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.